Well, it's lovely to be back with all of you again. I think we're going to have to go for a hat trick so I can actually go to Delaware sometime as well. Although I just realized when I say a hat trick, is that an American term? It's a cricket term to mean growing up in Australia. So, when you get 3 wickets with 3 balls, it's called a hat trick. Different connotations, but the same sort of thing. Today I want to talk about words. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I open my mouth and I just wish I'd never opened it. and I can't take back the words. And it's okay for some of you to sit there thinking I'm a little bit stupid, but why did I open my mouth and confirm it? And so you may not know, but my background, and I'm just going to step down for a second because I realized I needed my glasses because I'm going to read off the back there. So you may not realize this, but my actual undergrad degree is in physical education and exercise physiology. So I've always had an interest in sports, and so perhaps the best known people for opening their mouths when they should have kept them shut is sportsmen. So I thought I'd just start with a few little quotes from some sportsmen here as well. And I'm pushing on this, but it's not moving. Have I got to turn it on? Or is there a button on the side? Use that one? There you go. Oh, just use that one. Okay. All right, great. So Alan Minter, a boxing commentator, once said, "Sure, there have been injuries and deaths in boxing, but none of them serious." So I'm not sure what he defines as serious here. Sticking with the boxing thing, rugby here. I'm trying to read. I am a little bit short here. Is it okay if I step down a little bit to get a bit closer? Thank you. I didn't want to have something in front of me. So sticking with boxing, Rocky once said, "I quit school in the 6th grade because of pneumonia. Not because I had it, but because I couldn't spell it." and Seattle Seahawks wide receiver Steve Largent was asked which of the records he would cherish most after retiring from football. He responded with, "Probably the Beatles' White Album." Just to sort of let you know, Australians can be equally as dumb. Greg Norman, well-known Australian golfer, not well-liked at the moment. I owe a lot to my parents, especially my mother and father. And former NBA big man Caldwell Jones was asked what was his favorite seafood. He responded, saltwater taffy. Just because of the setting today, do any of you follow the World Cup? Do you know that today is sort of, US versus the Netherlands? Well, perhaps you've got, just to give you a glimmer of hope, so the Dutch soccer manager once said, "We must have had 99% of the match. It was the other 3% that cost us." So perhaps you do have hope against the Netherlands today, if that's their level of arithmetic. Former NFL great Lawrence Taylor described in the autobiography he planned to write, spoiler alert, "It's about me." Charles Shackelford, former NBA forward, said, "I can shoot with my left hand, I can shoot with my right hand. I'm amphibious." Now, every so often, sometimes we open our mouths, and suddenly some pearl of wisdom came out, and we look at it and we think, where did that come from? So every so often we say something memorable. Truman Capote, the great writer, once said, "Failure is the condiment that gives success its flavor." Henry Ford, the great, motor vehicle person, said, "Failure is the opportunity to begin again more intelligently." Still with Henry Ford, if you think you can't, you're right. You can't. Think about that. Aristotle, the great philosopher, once said, "Anyone can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, for the right purpose, at the right time, and in the right way, that is not easy. Dale Carnegie, the motivational speaker, says, you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get people interested in you. It's true, isn't it? Oh, I'm pushing on the wrong thing here. Happiness, this is something that there's no one to quote from this, but it's a little truism. It's a sad one. Happiness is not something you experience, it is something you remember. And isn't it kind of sad that we don't enjoy the moment, but in hindsight, we appreciate it? Why can't we enjoy it at the moment? Malcolm Forbes, the business genius, said, never hire someone who knows less than you about what they were hired to do. And Albert Einstein, the great genius, said that imagination is more important than knowledge. It's Walter Lippmann, when all think alike, no one thinks very much. I've seen that happen, haven't you? A little bit of Chinese, of Asian wisdom here. To lead people, walk behind them. I'm not going to try and pronounce his name. Rene will call him. Show me a guy who's afraid to look bad, and I'll show you a guy you can beat every time. Isn't it sad that sometimes we put too big a pressure around ourselves to look perfect so we won't take on things? And here's a little bit of wisdom from our Native American Indians. The tribal wisdom of the Dakota Indians passed from generation says that when you discover that you are riding a dead horse, the best strategy is to dismount. And unfortunately, many of us stay still riding that dead horse, don't we? We're not quite ready to give up yet. It's going to get up and run again someday. And Lord Callaghan makes this very sad statement on society. This is in the 17th century. It's still relevant today. A lie can be halfway around the world before the truth has got its boots on. Why is it we're always ready to believe the worst in someone? And perhaps for a little bit of cynicism, we turn to Groucho Marx. The secret of life is honesty and fair dealing. If you can fake that, you've got it made. And then for a little bit of local wisdom from Charles F. Kettering from here in Dayton, every father should remember one day his son will follow his example, not his advice. Isn't that true? You know, as we read in Psalms, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light for my path. How are our words? Do our words contribute to the darkness that's around about us? Maybe pile extra darkness upon people? Or do our words bring light? Do our words actually bring light to the world around about us? Do our words create a pathway for people to find the source of the true light? Or do our words contribute to the darkness that's around them? In Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 28 we read, an anxious heart weighs a man down, but a kind word cheers him up. You know, I was in a work situation once, and in that work situation, the boss never really had a good word to say to anybody. There was no words of praise or anything else. And so initially, everybody tried to win his praise, you know, by trying to do things to be noticed or whatever else. But eventually, when that wasn't coming, what they began to do is they began to actually make themselves look better than somebody else in the hope that maybe they would be the ones to get acknowledged. And it became a very dysfunctional workplace. So eventually the board moved in and they changed it. And we got this new boss that came in. And, you know, a couple weeks after he arrived, had left my office and I was walking to somewhere else. I bumped into him into the corridor. And he said, Jonathan, I'm so glad I saw you. I want to catch up with you today. You know, I've only been here a couple weeks, but I've kept my eyes and ears open, and I've seen the little things that you do around this organization that make a difference. And I want you to know it doesn't go unnoticed, it doesn't go unappreciated, and you're extremely well valued. Well, I felt really good for about half an hour until I had finished doing what I was doing, and as I was walking back to my office, I walked past, and the boss was talking to someone else in the corridor when he said, you know, I haven't been here very long, only a couple of weeks, but I've kept my eyes and ears open. And you know, just saying nice words doesn't actually mean anything, does it? If there's no true meaning and connection and intentionality and personal touch in what's been said. Our words need to have meaning. They need to come genuinely from the heart. Just saying nice things because you should say nice things doesn't make any difference. You know, a word aptly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. And I decided to go out. Do you use the word backpacking or tramping, or which is the word? Backpacking. We use the word backpacking. Some people say tramping. So we went out backpacking with some friends one long weekend. We planned this hike. It was through, well, we call it the high country in Australia, but you know, our highest mountain in Australia is about 8,000 feet or something, so we're not exactly super high. And we went up through the mountains. There's really only one big mountain range. And we planned this hike that was about 60 miles. So we're doing around 20 miles a day. So we're walking pretty good distances. And we'd all got our gear and got boots and thought we'd had them broken in and getting ready for this big event. Did a couple short hikes overnight somewhere in national parks. So we headed out to go through the high country. So we left a little bit early, and there was a cattleman's hut about 3 miles up the start of the mountain, and we thought we'll go and sleep in that cattleman's hut rather than pitch tents the first night. We'll be on the trail. So we started off up this track, and in that first 3 miles I began to feel a little bit of hot spots on my heels, and I was thinking, my goodness, we haven't even set out yet, but maybe it will be okay. The morning will be all right, I'll rest up and whatever. It was a bit of a rush getting there from work. So the next day, my blisters began to develop on my heels. So then I shifted my feet forward, so I walked more on the balls of my feet, so I got blisters on the balls of my feet, and my feet became this mess. And over that day and the next day, I gradually dropped off. So my friends had some conversation, because my feet would swell when I took my boots off. So we're in the middle of nowhere here. So none of us feel like we can carry Jonathan out of here. Well, I was slimmer then. And so it was like, okay, the best case is we're just going to ignore him. So have you ever been the last walker of a group? And you come along and they've all had a break and they've boiled the belly and they're having their lunch, and you get there and they're packing up, and it's like, look, we're going to set camp, follow these markers, we'll see you there tonight. And then you go down by the river and you wash your feet and you try and dress them, and the next day you get up and it was just a miserable experience walking with these blistered feet, just trudging along all day. And on the last day, one of them must have thought, this is not a good strategy. And so on that last day, he stayed behind and he walked with me. And the last day was our toughest day, because we'd camped at this river down at the base of Mount Feathertop, which was the second highest peak in Australia. And all the hike was up to the summit. And then there was a little crossover and down the other side to the car park, and that was our last day. And it was about a 20-mile, and probably 18 miles of it was uphill. And in spots it was steep, and you had to not quite rock climber, but hold on a little bit just because you had your backpack on. And on that last day, he walked with me, and we got to the peak of Mount Feathertop an hour ahead of the rest of them. The difference of having someone walk with you. The difference of it. And it's sad, but sometimes when we face difficult times, we don't know what to say, so we say nothing. Sometimes just our presence is necessary, not necessarily our words. But because of our own sense of inadequacy, often we stay away when someone needs us the most. It's sort of a sad thing. And so why am I sharing these things with you? Well, in a previous life, I had a lot of lives, I was the health director for the South Pacific Division. And people used to say to me, someone said to me, Jonathan, it used to be called Health and Temperance Director. Remember those days? Do any of you remember Smoking Sam or whatever, where they'd come around, if you had an Adventist background, and have these little puffing things, and they'd smoke a cigarette and a filter, and they'd show you how bad it is, and all the nicotine that was gathered from that one cigarette. And so they said, what are you doing about this sort of thing? And so it got me researching it a little bit, because I know that just information doesn't change behavior. And what is it that really we can do to help kids to grow up to be more responsible? What is it that can help them to grow into sensible adults? What is it that we can do to be able to keep them in the church? You know, I don't know about you, but if I asked everyone to stand up here today and said, sit down if you've had no one leave the church within your immediate family group of siblings or nieces or nephews or whatever, we'd all probably all stay standing. And then, you know, if I said, sit down if you can only count 10 people, we'd probably stay standing. You know, it's a sad situation, isn't it, when we think of people we went to school with. We think of family, extended family, people who, you know, I grew up in the church with that are no longer here with us today. So looking at how do I create an opportunity for success for young people, I began to get connected with Gary Hopkins, who's a researcher out of Loma Linda, Dwayne McBride out of Andrews. Between a small group, published about 700 papers in the area of how do we protect young people. And what the research has really come down to is it comes down to a few very essential elements. Young people are chameleons. They'll take on what color they need to fit in. So if they find acceptance and belonging within a group, they'll behave appropriate to within that group. If they don't find that acceptance, then they'll look elsewhere for it. If you're all getting drunk tonight, if I get drunk, does it mean that I'm part of you? If I give my body to you tonight, does it mean that I will feel, even if it's temporary, that someone loves me tonight? Young people are seeking relationships and seeking a sense of belonging. And too many of them today grow up socially isolated. You know, there's a big emphasis on stranger danger. You know, we're scared sometimes to talk to young people because we're not sure how to talk to them or whether it's appropriate or what is appropriate to say anymore. You know, the political correctness drives us out of young people's lives. Our own fear of rejection drives us out of young people's lives. But what young people are seeking is they're seeking relationships. And they're seeking a safe place where they know that someone cares for them. You know, the International Youth Foundation puts it this way: every young person needs at least one adult who is irrationally committed to their well-being. Millions of children grow up virtually alone, disconnected from adults. No love, no supervision, no positive role models. Yet these people must still find their way. They must still grow up to become adults. Children can endure the most miserable conditions, even thrive in the midst of them, when, if they have, at least one loving adult committed to their success. My friend Gary Hopkins was teaching a unit for a Masters of Public Health in Africa. He's teaching a unit on adolescent addiction behavior. And he introduced a topic, and he said to them in the classroom, you know, stories of resilience. Did any of you grow up in a difficult situation? And one young woman put up her hand. She said, yes. She said, my father was an alcoholic. My father was married to 3 different women during my childhood. So Gary said to her, well, you're at risk of early initiation of sex, multiple pregnancies, addiction behaviors. What are you doing in my classroom here today? She said, I'm a missionary doctor serving in Africa. And he said, you've got to have a story. What's your story? She said, you know, as a young girl, my father was drunk inside. I was out in the front yard playing, just keeping out of the way. And an old lady from up the street walked by, and she stopped and she leant on the fence and she engaged me in conversation. And during that conversation, she said to me, would you like me to pick you up and take you on the weekend and bring you to my church? Because my church is a place where you feel loved and safe. And that lady stopped and took her to church, and she said, that church, the people surrounding me, are the reason why I didn't follow in my father's footsteps and why I'm a missionary doctor serving in Africa today. Because that church was a beautiful church of people who just loved on me and accepted me and gave me a safe place of belonging. Are we willing to be that place? Now, we don't see a lot of children in this congregation. I know there are in other congregations as well, but the truth is it doesn't really matter because there's people who live in our neighborhoods. You know, many of us are grandparents or uncles or aunts or brothers or sisters or or just neighbors. You know, research shows us that young people seek help only from adults that they see as caring and nurturing. Notice the requirements there, caring and nurturing. It doesn't matter if you don't still have all your own hair, thank goodness. It doesn't matter if you still have all your own teeth or not. None of that is a requirement. What is the requirement? That they feel that you care and that you're vested in them. And actually, this is not just trying to give you some little soft talk to feel good about yourself or challenge. This comes from thousands of studies of scientific research that says this is the key element. And this is the key element that we have to challenge ourselves as a church in order to keep young people within our congregations. It is clear that young people grow to maturity in general and to maturity in Christ in particular by being around those people who have such maturity themselves. Margaret Mead, the renowned anthropologist, warned of the dangers of what she called a co-figurative culture, a culture in which all learning is horizontal and little or no learning comes from the older and wiser generation. You see, where do children learn their decision makings? Where do they learn their values from? You know, too often they have helicopter parents who make all the excuses for them, so they don't learn the repercussions of bad choices, which means they go on making bigger and bigger choices till one day those choices are irreversible, or those choices lead them into addictions or to crimes or to other factors. We need to give responsibility, and we need to hold them to responsibility. We need to let them feel the repercussions. Children will experiment, that is normal. But the breadth of which they experiment narrows by the more layers of support and connection that we put around them. If we surround them, the range that they'll experiment becomes less, and the likelihood they'll take on the norms becomes greater. But as we take away those layers of connections, the breadth of which they experiment becomes wider, and the likelihood they'll come back to the norms becomes less. I was giving a talk at a camp meeting. They asked me to talk on pornography, not a topic that I really knew a lot about, but I did a bit of research. Did you know that pornography generates more income than NFL, the NBA, the NHL, and the MLB combined? It generates more income than Hollywood. It's huge. And so I was talking on this to a men's group at camp meeting, and afterwards a man came up to me. He put up his hand and he said, Jonathan, you know, there's all sorts of different kinds of pornography. You know, we've got this young girl at church. She comes from the wrong side of the tracks. You know, a lot of her siblings have got into trouble. A couple of them are in jail. You know, she comes along to church and she dresses this most provocative way. He said, if you're sitting behind her when she bends over, you see things that you should not see. And if you're sitting in front of her when she bends forward, then you see right down to her navel. Isn't that pornography? I thought, well, I'm not going to bite. So I kept asking more and more questions. So the youth group was performing one Sabbath, and they were meant to come up onto the rostrum and perform, and someone stopped her and said, you can't go up there. Dress the way you are. You're not good enough. You shouldn't be presented in front of the church. And I said to him, now what you've done is you've given her a label. You've told her, can I say the word, W word? You've told her that she looks like a whore. Now she dresses like one. So what I want you to do is go back and you get everyone in that church and you say to them, we're just going to love on that girl. Because when she feels acceptance from our group, you'll notice that she'll change to fit in with the group. But while she feels rejected, then she's just flaunting the rejection in your face because she's reacting to that. How do we create a safe space where people can be loved? How do we create that? And not just within our church, but within our neighborhoods. There's kids who live next door to you on the same street as you, who just need someone significant to stop and learn their name and talk to them, engage them in a regular conversation. How'd you go in the spelling bee? I heard you kicked a goal in the soccer on Wednesday night or something. You know, that significance, what seems insignificant, is actually life-changing for young people. And words, a young person can grow up in an abusive situation, and all they hear, our words can be prophetic, but too often our words are pathetic You know, you're never going to amount to anything. You're hopeless, you're useless, you're worthless, you're just like your father. Well, what are they going to become? Like their father. But they know you and trust you. And you say, hey, man, I've been watching you. You've got some talent here. What about if I encourage you? Or what if I come into the workshop and we'll do something together? You know, you create a different vision. If they trust you, they'll believe you. You can create a different vision of what they can just by giving them the right words and having the right relationship with their things. We don't teach a child how to become resilient. We surround them with social support in a loving and caring environment. We learn their names and greet them personally, taking a few moments to talk one-on-one, and we develop enduring relationships with them. That's actually how we keep young people in the church. That's how we prevent drug addiction. You know, we are the second worst city in the US when it comes to the opioid crisis and addictions. And we are pouring millions of dollars into all the treatment programs, but we're doing nothing in prevention. What if our churches became those beacons of light, the safe place for young people, where young people actually felt they had a sense of belonging and connection? It doesn't matter if they're the only young person in our church here. The issue is, this is a safe place where they feel like they belong. If churches stepped up to do that, we would actually change the trajectory of our communities. But suppose they look at the model and find a person with whom they can truly identify. Suppose they find a warm, loving, accepting, compassionate heart. Suppose they find high principles, personal standards. Sorry, I've got to get closer. I put too many words on this. Suppose they find a warm, loving, accepting, compassionate heart. Suppose they find high personal standards coupled with a great understanding of human weakness in others. Suppose they find one who has purpose in their life, who knows where they are going, and who journey on their way with who journey on their way with a song on their lips and a radiance on their face because God is with them. Will they not say, that is what I want, let them follow you. Teach me how to find the way that you have found. Sorry, I could have turned around. Look at that, see? That's what I need to do, just turn around. So, you know, sometimes the answer's over our shoulder and we just need to look behind us. When we look at that, what if we became that church? What if we became that church? What if we were the people who changed the trajectory for young people in New Carlisle, or in Springfield, or in Delaware? You know, I do workshops all over the world on this. I'd love to do one day and just talk to you about the whole balance of this in a bit more detail. But so let me share with you. I wanted to share with you just this. I love sometimes how the Message writes something, you know, in plain English. So it's not a translation, okay? So in James chapter 3 it says, "Don't be in any rush to become a teacher, my friends. Teaching is highly responsible work. Teachers are held to the strictest standards. None of us is perfectly qualified. We get it wrong nearly every time we open our mouths. If you could find someone whose speech was perfectly true, you'd have a perfect person in perfect control of life. A bit in the mouth of a horse controls the whole horse. A small rudder on a huge ship in the hands of a skilled captain sets a course in the face of the strongest winds. A word out of my mouth may seem of no account, but it can accomplish nearly anything or destroy it. It only takes a spark, remember, to set off a forest fire. A careless or wrongly placed word out of your mouth can do that. By our speech, we ruin the world, turn harmony to chaos, throw mud on a reputation, send the whole world up in smoke and go up in smoke with it. Smoke right from the pit of hell. This is scary. You can tame a tiger, but you can't tame a tongue. It's never been done. The tongue runs wild, a wanton killer. With our tongues we bless God our Father. With the same tongues we curse the very men and women he made in his image. Curses and blessings out of the same mouth? My friends, this can't go on. A spring doesn't gush fresh water one day and brackish the next, does it? Apple trees don't bear strawberries, do they? Raspberry bushes don't bear apples, do they? You're not going to dip into a polluted mud hole and get a cup of clear, cool water, are you? Do you want to be counted wise, to build a reputation for wisdom? Here's what you do. Live well. Live wisely. Live humbly. It's the way you live, not the way you talk, that counts. Mean-spirited ambition isn't wisdom. Boasting that you are wise isn't wisdom. Twisting the truth to make yourselves sound wise isn't wisdom. It's the furthest thing from wisdom. It's animal cunning, devilish plotting. Whenever you're trying to look better than others or get the better of others, things fall apart and everyone ends up at the other's throats. Real wisdom, God's wisdom, begins with a holy life and is characterized by getting along with others. It is a gentle and reasonable, overflowing with mercy and blessings, not hot one day and cold the next, not two-faced. You can develop a healthy, robust community that lives right with God and enjoy its results only if you do the hard work of getting along with each other, teaching each other with dignity and honor. And when we create that community, then this is the beacon of light that's led to God's word, that brings light to his word. You know, now I've got to put my glasses back on again. In Proverbs we read, do not let unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Do any of you remember Florence Liddell? I'm getting old, so I remember some of her writings. And you know, she was this, you remember? Sorry? Yes, yeah, and she wrote a book about silver something or others. I've forgotten the title. I did know it a minute ago. And so, you know, she was this well-known Christian author and speaker. And she tells the story. Her mother-in-law was getting older. And her husband and her had to talk about it. Is she going to come and live with us? Or are we going to put her into a nursing home? Silver boxes, thank you. And so they talked about it, decided that she should come and live with them, at least while they were capable of looking after her. So her mother-in-law moved in, and she was sitting in the living room one day doing some handcrafts with her mother-in-law, and they were talking. And she looked across at her mother-in-law and she said, Mum, if you could live your life all over again, what would you do differently? And her mother-in-law thought for a minute, and she said, if I could live my life all over again, I would be an opera singer. and Florence looked at her and thought, I think maybe we should have put her in a nursing home. You know, because have you ever seen people in church, they stand there, they never sing, their mouth is closed. She had been married to this, you know, woman's son for, you know, I don't know at that stage, 40 years or more. And she'd never once heard her mother-in-law sing. And she said, Mum, you would be an opera singer? She said yes. And she left the room and she came back. And when she came back, she had a photo that Florence had never seen before. And in that photo was a picture of her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law, unbeknownst to her, when she went to college, specialized in music and specialized in voice. And she was chosen to be the lead diva, the lead singer, in the university's operatic performance that time. And here was a picture of a huge crowd of people, thousands in the auditorium on their feet, giving her a standing ovation, and she had this bouquet of flowers that she was taking a curtsy in front of the cast. And she saw this picture for the first time. And she looked at this picture and she said to her, Mum, what happened? She said, you know, that was the end of my university life. That was the performance was the last thing. The car was packed. My parents were taking me home. And I got in the car that night with the applause of thousands of people in my ear. And my mother started on me. Don't think you're good. Don't think you've got a future in this. Don't think you can sing. Dad has a good business. Come and work in a family business. But don't go chasing your dreams, because it will just end in disaster and disappointment. And the words of her mother rang in her ears, and she never ever sang again. Never ever sang again. Oliver Wendell Holmes once said, many of us die with the music still in us. Now God's given every single person a purpose to be in this world. What sometimes young people need is for us to gather around them, to get them to know them well enough to identify the music that's trapped in them and be a vessel for helping to open it out. Are we prepared to be those people? Whether it's just on the street with the kids that walk by every day, or whether it's amongst my own family, whether it's amongst my own faith community, are we prepared to be adults who stand up and unlock that music that God's placed in every young person so they can reach their God-given potential and so that they can connect with the one who's put something special in each of them? You know, may our words, aptly spoken, like apples of gold in seedlings of silver. I wanted to play for you a little video. It's by Casting Crowns. It's a little bit rocky, so I hope you're not offended. But as you watch this video, it just summarizes everything that I've really talked about. And I dare you not to get a tissue out at some stage.